So I think we need science diplomacy 3.0, I'll say, a speed up science diplomacy. But to be successful, there's a couple of conditions. One of them, critically important, is trust. Trust between countries, of course, that's very important, but also in a given country, trust between the scientists and government.
Welcome to The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus. A podcast exploring how science, technology, and strategic partnerships are shaping our world and the diplomacy that brings them together. Now, here is your host, Daniella Sussman.
This episode of The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus is brought to you by Global Signals, a bi-weekly newsletter for globally minded leaders. Each issue delivers early insights into science, innovation, and diplomacy, covering AI, quantum, biotech, space, and health. You'll find emerging signals, international partnership opportunities, and clear takeaways to stay ahead of what's next across the innovation ecosystem and global diplomacy. Subscribe today through the link in the episode description.
What happens when technology moves faster than policy? From AI reshaping healthcare to innovation hubs driving global research breakthroughs, the speed of science is transforming how diplomacy works. In an era where breakthroughs in AI, quantum, health, and space are emerging faster than any one nation, industry, alliance, or research institution can influence or leverage, science diplomacy is the bridge for cooperation. It brings together scientific expertise, diplomatic strategy, academic leadership, and private sector innovation, turning potential challenges into collaborative achievements and ensuring advances serve the public good worldwide. I'm joined today by Professor Rémi Quirion, Quebec's inaugural chief scientist and president of the International Network for Governmental Science Advice, or INGSA. Rémi, welcome to The Global Lens.
Nice to be with you today. A big pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to dive into this topic with you. Obviously, you've been at the intersection of science, policy, and diplomacy for years. In our current moment, as AI, quantum, health innovation, and space exploration move so quickly, how do you define science diplomacy?
Well, there is quite a few definitions of science diplomacy, but in a nutshell, I'd say how science can help a relationship between countries. So that's kind of a bit of the original definition of science diplomacy, and we saw the impact of that during the COVID pandemic. With open science, the rapid development of vaccine and all that. But since then, only a few years, the geopolitical landscape has changed quite a lot. You mentioned AI, you mentioned quantum, that's also accelerating everything. So I think we need science diplomacy 3.0, I'll say, a speed up science diplomacy. But to be successful, there's a couple of conditions. One of them, critically important, is trust. Trust between countries, of course, that's very important, but also in a given country, trust between the scientists and government. Elected official or high-level policymaker, very, very important that you develop and you build trust between these individuals. Otherwise, the impact at the global level, at the international level, will be minimal. That's true in a nation, but what's a bit different for the past few years, also true at the level of state or region, like for me in Quebec, and even more now at the level of cities, what we call proximity government. More and more cities are using science diplomacy to connect. So trust is key. Other keyword is resilience, because the power at B will change often. Like myself, over the past few years, I had 14 different ministers in 5 different governments. So you have to be able to adapt. And when you think that you just succeeded in convincing people, in building the trust, then they change. So you have to start again. So resilience is another key factor of success in science diplomacy.
That's a really insightful way to frame it, Rémi. I'm always curious about what your role as chief scientist looks like day to day. Could you walk us through a typical day, from advising the ministers to ensuring science is understood and trusted in the rooms where policy decisions are made?
It's an interesting question, and often people ask me about that. What's a typical day? And I think, like colleagues in the world that have a bit of similar role, probably the most typical day is atypical. You basically come in the morning, you think you'll be able to work on some dossier, some report that you're supposed to work on, and then, whoops, you just had a call from someone in government that will ask you about advice on topic A or B. So you have to drop everything and work on that. So I think often that's what happens in the daily life of a chief scientist. So you need to have a team, even if it's not a big team. You need to have colleagues that collaborate with you to make sure that at least the regular work continue, and then you're able to answer minister or prime minister, premier, to answer some of their queries. And usually when they have queries, it's not time to write a report or a PhD thesis, as they will often say. You have to answer in a few hours. You're lucky if you have a day. So that's the reality of a chief scientist. But it's a fun part as well. So it's a very different way from academic type of career.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear behind the scene. And that really kind of gives us a sense of how science diplomacy shapes policy at the highest level. I want to shift to a global perspective. How can science diplomacy, ensure AI breakthroughs benefit more countries rather than just staying siloed in just a few?
That's a very, very important question. And I'm quite anxious about that as well. And that may be my role at INGSA, the International Network for Governmental Science Advice. This organization, INGSA, was built first in the Global South. So that's kind of unique compared to other organizations. And we have to make sure that we do not leave anyone behind. If we think of AI and the industry, the big company, especially in the US, but also we have some in China and other parts of the world, in Europe, in North America, Japan, China is fairly well developed. But you have to make sure that we do not leave country in the Global South, not leave them out of basically the opportunity given by AI, quantum, and other type of technology in the life sciences, for example. So we need to make sure that we connect with this country, that we build capacity in science advice, as well as in science diplomacy, that we include them very early on in the discussion about, for example, the governance of AI. That's critically important.
I think you touched on, obviously, the global collaboration access. I want to talk about the ethical side of innovation. How do we balance innovation with ethics and shared standards, especially when it comes to technologies like AI and gene editing as they accelerate?
So I think there as well, we have to bring the key partner early on in the game. So you should not try to impose anything on everyone. So you have to have people, and after that we see the public engage very early on. Could be AI, could be gene editing, could be GMOs or whatever. So we need to make sure that we share the information and we develop a common framework together. And that's, of course, difficult because the industry, especially AI and the digital economy, is moving so fast that sometimes it's hard for government to keep up with the speed of development in the industry, but in the industry or academia as well. But it's absolutely essential. And I think here the key is to involve the public early on. Otherwise, if we lose them in the long run, we'll lose opportunity to have proper governance and proper ethical type of development of this new strategy.
I think this balance is really critical. I think you touched on, working also in your work about national, regional, and city level. That's something that you have worked extensively. Can you give us an example on how city drive this collaboration?
Often we talk a lot about the impact of global warming. We talk a lot about access to AI-related technology, for example. Sometimes it's hard, and it's okay, hard for, I would say, an ordinary citizen to understand all of that. So proximity government, like city government, we know our mayor, we know member of a local government, and we are a bit afraid sometimes to talk to government at other level. So it's very, very close to you, and often I would say, what's the impact for someone living in Montreal if we change something in terms of AI, in terms of quantum, and then you can explain to these guys, yes, that could be the impact positive. Maybe there's also some negative impacts. So how do we balance all these type of new strategy? And let's say you have we have a lot of forest fire these days, a lot of flooding. The impact is seen at the very local level. So there also you have to involve citizen and science advisor and science diplomat early on. And one city could share what they have done with another city in another part of the world. So there's more and more of this type of network of cities, and there is action in a very emergency type of situation. They have no choice. The fire is there. You have to try to find solution, or flooding.
That is really true. I just want to go back quickly to when you talked about INGSA, the International Network for Governmental Science Advice. I know you're leading efforts to build stronger science advisory networks between North America and the Global South. Can you highlight a bit more why this is so critical?
Basically, we were talking about science diplomacy. And for science diplomacy, another important part of science diplomacy is science advice. To be successful, the quality of science needs to be very, very good. The quality of science advice also that you give to your government need to be very, very strong. So INGSA, when it was established about 10 years ago, the objective is to increase science capacity in science advice globally. And as I said earlier, we start with the Global South. The first chapter of INGSA was built in Africa. Then after that in Asia, in Latin America. Now we just opened one in Europe, and we're working on one for North America. So we want to build capacity broadly in science advice, in science diplomacy. And when we'll have the full network of chapter, I hope, that's one of my objectives, that they will start to interact more and more together. Like what we were saying, if there is a forest fire or flooding, earthquake in some part of Asia, maybe some country in Africa can learn from that as well. So building science advice and science diplomacy all over the world is absolutely essential.
That is really critical. And one of the exciting initiatives I've been obviously following all your efforts is working with universities. You're creating these science diplomacy chairs across Quebec universities. They're each linked to international partners. What impact do you hope this higher education network will have on global cooperation? For example, when it comes to AI governance, Arctic research, and environmental resilience?
That's a great question as well. And of course, we'll see. It's still early in the game. So we have 18 public university in Quebec. We opened the opportunity to create 10 of these chairs in diplomacy. I think probably when we get the peer review panel, we'll revise that in September. By the end of September, we should know. I think we'll probably end up creating 8 or 9 of them. Each university had the opportunity to make one proposal to us. And of course, that's not me directly that will decide in the peer review panel, but I know that we receive proposal on AI and the governance of AI, on the Arctic and the Antarctic, on the maritime, the transport of goods, on ocean, what do you do about the life sciences, access to healthcare. So, and each of these submission, each of these chairs have to have at least one international partner, because of course diplomacy, you don't do that at home. So you have to link with at the global level. So there is at least 13 countries that are involved in the proposal that we have received. And of course, the first few years, 1 year or two, will be to establish, develop the collaboration between these partners. But I really hope that then the 8 or 9 chair will start to network and learn from each other. And also will continue to expand. Like maybe at the moment there is one university in Quebec with one university or center in France, but hopefully they will open to others at some point, maybe to, if needed, to Japan, to Africa, to Latin America, whatever. So really creating a network of science diplomacy chair. And I really hope that we have no patent on that formula. So I really hope that other parts of the world will decide to do a bit of the same, so that together we can increase capacity in science diplomacy globally, and also focus on some aspect of science diplomacy, because science diplomacy related to AI is a bit different, somewhat different from healthcare. So you have to adapt also to the type of science diplomacy that you are covering. So hopefully we'll be able to learn from that, and hopefully the younger generation will be excited by that and will want to be involved.
I think it's really exciting to see universities are playing such a big role. I know you're investing in the next generation of leaders as well. You have created Scientist in Residence program that place PhDs into ministries, embassies, and city offices. How has this shaped the next generation of science diplomats, in your opinion? And what do you think other countries can learn from it?
I think basically for us at the beginning, the objective was to give more opportunity to PhD holder, because often, say you do your PhD, let's say in neuroscience, and you want a job in academia, in a neuroscience department, or sometime in industry. It's okay, and that's perfect to do that, but of course there is often not enough job in academia or in the private sector for all the trainees that we are granting. So more and more we're trying to diversify opportunity for these guys, for these men and women that have just finished their PhD. So we started with that by opening kind of postdoc in the Quebec office abroad. And at the beginning I was thinking it would be mostly a PhD holder in social science, in humanities, in political science. But no, the first two, a chemist and an astrophysicist. And both of them, we lost them for these fields because they become excited by science diplomacy, and now they are more like science diplomat. So I think it's diversified the type of job that you could go for, and also they start to talk to their friend and say, oh, there is also this opportunity maybe to work in a government locally, to work in a city as a scientist in the cities. So that's something that we want to do more and more. In the US, for example, AAAS, also program in science diplomacy for a few years, and that's developing in other parts of the world. So there again, we hope that at some point there'd be a strong global network in science advice and science diplomacy, and these students can go from one place to another to learn from each other. So that's one of my objectives.
And I think it's really inspiring to hear, Rémi, that how you're building a pipeline for future diplomats. And I want to touch beyond academia and government. I want to look at private sector because they also have a role. How do you see the private sector engaging in science diplomacy?
Probably still a bit early because we're busy with other things. But I think that more and more we have to reach to them. We have to link with these guys. We could think again of quantum computing or AI. The big company in the US, the big GAFAM of the world, they are investing more in AI research than most governments. So we need to find a way to link them much better with us in academia, in government, and also working with them in developing science diplomacy, and again, making sure that we do not forget about other parts of the world. That's not just focused in, let's say, North America, but by using science diplomacy, including academicians that will do it, including government experts, but as well industry experts. So I think it's starting to more and more in industry to think about, okay, how science diplomacy can help what we are trying to do globally. A lot of it will have to do with governance as well at the global level, but I think more and more will go through that over the next few years.
That's a great point about how industry can contribute. And I think it's clear every sector has a role to play. So let's talk about the public's role. I know you often emphasize citizens should not be just observers, that they have to be part of the science diplomacy. What is public engagement? Why is it so important?
The type of economy in the US, in Canada, and many European countries, basically citizens pay taxes. And basically, I would say in Quebec, they pay my salary. So to involve them in the discussion, I think it's critically important. Of course, one aspect of it is to increase literacy in science, literacy in numerical type of technology. That's very important, starting very early from even primary school and throughout the lifetime. But also giving them opportunity as citizens to be at the table and to suggest some research projects. They have some question that they would like to have answer for. So you discuss with them. Of course, it's challenging. It takes time. You have to start to understand the language of each other because we don't speak the same language. But then when it starts to click, it's fabulous. So we have a program at the Quebec Research Fund, Engagement, so engaging the public, and we receive a lot of proposals, especially on healthcare, and also on the environment from everyone in the community. And then we sit down with scientists, they build the project together. And in the end, if there is good result, that's great. But if not, that's okay too, because then citizens understand a little bit more the scientific method, and that you go one step forward, two step backward. You have to change the hypothesis depending on your data and all that. So I think bringing the public on board early on is absolutely key if we want to continue to make sure that we stay at the forefront of science and of research globally.
Yeah, I love how you emphasize the public's role in this. I think it really brings it in full circle. Looking to the future now, when you look ahead at AI, quantum, health innovation, and space, what is the biggest science diplomacy opportunity over the next 5 years, in your opinion?
Things are going so fast in the field of AI and quantum. So I think bringing these two together, yes, they are a bit together, but not necessarily always. So I think these two working more and more together, find new ways to ensure that this technology will not use as much, for example, energy as they are using now. So doing science diplomacy again, to work with countries that are developing quantum and countries that are maybe focusing more on AI, to bring them together. So I think for me that over the next few years, certainly will be a key area. And again, the development is going so rapidly that we'll have to ensure that we, again, involve government, but also our citizens, that they are there with us, they support the scientific activities, both in the private and the public sector.
Absolutely. And I think it's exciting, when you think about what's possible, but it's moving so fast. I love to hear your personal advice. You have spoken about institutions, industry, citizens. I'd like for you to share one piece of advice with the next generation of science diplomats. What would it be?
I think we are in a new era in terms of science diplomacy. Over the past few years, with the global situation, things have changed a lot. So we are all learning. So a young person or me that have done that, we're back to not necessarily square one, but we have to relearn the way we do things. We have to develop new ways to do science advice, to do science diplomacy. It's a big challenge. But at the same time, I will say to the younger generation, do not be afraid. Jump in. And you will work hard. It will be challenging, but at the same time, you will have fun. And the fun part is absolutely essential as well.
Is there anything else you would like to add or share with our audience?
I think if I can, maybe after they hear what we have been discussing over the past few minutes, if some young people or even older people decide to say, I would like to know more about science diplomacy, about science advice, and that few of them decide to go for a career in science diplomacy, that will make my day.
Amazing. I think it's clear without science diplomacy, we risk fragmented standards, ethical blind spots, and an innovation arms race. With science diplomacy, we can build a framework for cooperation where innovation drives progress and science shapes solution. And I think you have really touched on that. I wanted to say thank you for joining me today, Rémi. It's been a real pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to The Global Lens on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Keep listening as we explore the future of innovation and the role of science diplomacy in building international partnerships and finding innovative solutions to our shared global challenges. Thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus. To hear more conversations at the intersection of science, policy, and international partnerships, subscribe to The Global Lens on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and over 30 platforms around the globe. Send us your ideas and guest suggestions to Daniella@globallenspodcast.com.